Once
Yeah.
they get on that planet and they have their own problems, it wasn't like escaping for one problem for another one. You still have to face your problems on the other planet. And that's, the underlying story of the book, where a lot of us basically faced our demons during that time, whether figurative or literal. We
Yeah.
had to face them head on. If I perish during that time, so be it. If not, I'll fight my way through this.
This is the future.
Hello and welcome to the Alternate Futures podcast, where we chat with indie sci-fi creators about their work, the world, and anything in between, or beyond. Today I'm here with Zack Samo, an optometrist by day and a sci-fi writer by night. Zack was inspired by films like Dark City and Interstellar to pen his debut novel Exodus 2065, a story about humanity's last stand on a post-apocalyptic Earth against demonic creatures from the planet's depth. Zack, thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So I think I've had a lot of people with various job backgrounds. IT is a big one, but I think you're my first optometrist. What made you go into optometry? Why optometry?
Well, I started very early as far as wearing glasses. We're in school, they see you at the back of the class, and then you start squinting, and slowly but surely they start moving each year a little closer and closer to the board. Until there was no closer, it's just a board. And then the teacher's like, I think we have a problem. So he called my parents, and I think we have a problem here. I think your son can't see. So they took me to the optometrist. And lo and behold, everything seemed techy, fancy. Like, wow, that's a cool job to have. And, lo and behold, he gives me the glasses and voila, I'm seeing again. So that's where it basically started. I'm like, fascination with optometry. So when I was in college, I was an arts major. And then, I switched to an engineering major until eventually I'm like, why don't I go back to what I thought when I was a little kid? And then that's how I became a bio major and got into optometry school.
Oh, excellent. So what's a day in the life of an optometrist
Well,
like?
well, just like everybody else, I guess, you wake up, you go to your job, and then you start seeing patients that start piling from the get-go. And then you go by each chart one by one, each with the different problems. Some come in not being able to see, some, with either their eyes feel funny, they hurt. So, just you tackle them one by one as they come along the way.
Okay. That's interesting because I mean, inherently a non-professional or expert like me inherently just thinks, oh, well, I guess my experience is with the sort of franchise chains where you just go in and you're there to buy glasses and they just sort of give you an eye test and then you just buy the
That's
glasses and
that's the perception, with here as well. But I don't know how optometrists are, in UK, but here is just like more. I think it takes 4 years of undergraduate work and then another 4 years of optometry school. So it's basically, you have to have an extensive knowledge of the eye, the vision, and the visual system. So a lot of people come in thinking, I will just get, a pair of glasses, and they haven't checked their eyes in over 10, 15 years. And lo and behold, they have a bunch of other issues that they didn't know of, diabetes, uncontrolled blood pressure, bleeding inside the eye. And, I'm like, how did you drive all these years? A simple reason as needing glasses turns out to a more major problem, health problems such as diabetes or even tumors inside the eye, where you have to immediately refer, or the brain, tumors inside the brain where half of their visual field is missing. And then you get on the phone right away, try to get them into the nearest specialist.
right.
Luckily, those cases don't come along that often, but they do every now and then.
Right. I'm curious, have you seen any uptick in issues since COVID? I mean, my timing was kind of bad. I turned 50 in the year of COVID. And so that was kind of a combination of my age plus sitting indoors staring at the computer for long periods of time. And my vision changed fairly dramatically in a short period of time. But I'm just curious if that was a general thing.
There was, yeah. I mean, during COVID, like it was weird. Somehow the virus caused, and on top of other things like body issues, heart palpitations, things like that. One of the symptoms was also vision fluctuation. So yeah, I did see that.
So the obvious question is, how does an optometrist decide to move into writing science fiction, basically?
Well, I'm a sci-fi nerd, like, I mean, I've all name a sci-fi movie, well, at least within the last 20 years or so, I've probably seen it. Dark City was one of my favorite, even though it's like not a lot of people know about it. I don't know if you've heard about Dark
I've
City or
heard, I couldn't reference anything from it, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
it's an awesome movie. Interstellar, and during COVID, believe it or not, that's when an idea came into my mind, like, and just like everywhere else with lockdown, you couldn't do anything. And that's when the idea came into me of writing the book, of writing the idea of Exodus 2065. And I wrote the bulk of the book during that time.
So, we'll get into the book a little bit later, but I'm just curious, was it the sort of end of the world feeling that inspired that from COVID?
Pretty
Okay.
much, yeah. With people dying left and right, you don't know if you were gonna get it, and if you got it, was it, you had some underlying issue where it was gonna take you out or not. So, and I did get it twice, so luckily I'm still here. So,
Yeah.
uh, so things like that motivated me. Just like a lot of people's perspective changed, when you're faced with your mortality. You're like, what am I doing? Am I really happy with what I'm doing? Not that I wasn't happy, but what are some other things I would like to be doing? And
Right.
writing was one of them.
Time to pull out the bucket list and
Exactly,
get to work on it. Yeah.
exactly.
So, how did you find the experience? Once, I mean, was it because it would have been something, but from the sounds of it, something new to you? A lot of the guests I've had will have said, "Oh, I started writing when I was in grade school or something," but it sounds like you don't have that experience.
I did. I had some writing experience when I was younger. I would write some good essays in my English classes, and the teachers would be like, "Oh, look at Zach's essay," and then he'll feature it in the class. But as far as any major, besides short stories and things like that, not really. That was the first time.
Right. And so, how did you approach the process then? Because I mean, storytelling is not intuitive to everyone.
It's
Um,
not. Initially, I just started writing the ideas of the major book nonstop, basically. Okay, so this is the story, and then this is what's going to happen. This is what happened. This what transpired. Asteroid or well, it starts with the mega quake of LA, and then after that followed usually later by a big asteroid impacting the Earth. Basically, I wrote whatever came to my mind as far as what the idea was, and then after that, basically going and okay, so here's first section. How do I expand on it? And I just took it scientifically, basically, just like you would do anything.
right. Did you have a set period of hours that you'd write per day since you were in lockdown?
I didn't. I just went at it and started writing.
Just the
And that
inspiration took you.
exactly. And then I just, to be honest with you, back in the day, like I couldn't find, besides like the Avengers movies that came out and stuff, there wasn't that many sci-fi movies that I'm like, there hasn't been any sci-fi movies that I basically enjoy. So I mean, is it just like lack of imagination? Are people not trying anymore? So I'm like, let me give it a shot and see if I can come up with something.
And so, how long did it take you to finish the first draft then?
The first draft basically took me, I would say, about 4 months, 5 months.
Okay, that's not bad.
So
Yeah.
basically, during that COVID lockdown, I finished probably like 80, 75, 80% of it.
Just sat down and let the inspiration take you away. Yeah.
Exactly.
As something you hadn't done before, what was your experience, your feelings once you finished that first draft?
It was elating. It was an experience that, you probably just like, passing a major test in, like at school, and they're like, you got an A in a grade, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I did this. Wow. But then, after you read, I'm like, after you read it, I'm like, oh, this is crap. Now I have to fix it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You gave it to a beta reader. My daughter, I'm like, her name is Romina, and I gave her the first draft. And she's like, it's good.
I
They
don't
don't
want to
want
be
to hurt your
discouraging.
feeling. Exactly. Okay, so I can see that. And then I knew I had a lot of work left to refine that draft, second draft, third draft, until it's something that I was happy with eventually.
So how long did it take you, let's say, to get to that happy point and then give it to an editor or something?
I would say after the first draft, maybe about 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah. 6 months, and then I gave it to editor, and that took another couple months or so.
Right. And so once you had it at a state where you felt, okay, I'm happy to this is called this the finished product. Did you right away think, oh, I'm going to publish this? Or did you think, what am I going to do with this now? What was that thought like, that process?
Well, you still are apprehensive, since this is your debut writing. You don't know if your grammar was correct, if your sequence was right. I had no clue. I read some novels here and there, but nothing in detail. So I gave it to a few people as beta readers, and they enjoyed it. They're like, I think you should publish this. And that's when I'm like, okay, why not? I'll just self-publish it.
So yeah, I was going to ask then, you didn't think at all to go traditional. It's just like, let's get this in the marketplace.
I did not, just knowing from other indie writers by the time, you got to have a lot of connections. You got to have this, you got to have that, and then you got to do so. I just being writing basically as a side passion or as a hobby. And you know how it is. If you have a major job, you're just, you go to your job 7 to 5, and then you come home. You just don't have the time to go after that, looking after publishers, to see and I didn't even know the route into how you approach publishers. So I'm like, you know what, I'll just publish it myself.
And so when did you publish it? Which year was that?
I think it was June or July of 2023.
Okay. So were you still in lockdown over there while you were finishing up some of it, or had you gone back to work by that
No,
time?
no, we had gone back to work.
Right.
Basically, after about 4 months of lockdown, I was able, since I was, a health provider, I was
Right.
able to get back to work, a little bit sooner than, other professions.
Right. Did they include optometry as an essential service then?
They did.
All right, that's good.
They did.
So once you published it, then it goes to the marketplace, and then sort of what was your approach after that? Because that's a whole new thing as well, isn't it? And a lot of people aren't quite sure what to do. You sit back and expect that the sales come in. Do you have to,
To be
chase
honest with you,
after?
I didn't have any expectations. I'm like, I'll publish it just because I put a lot of time and effort into it. And then if people find out about it, great. If not, it was a joyful experience and gave me an experience to maybe in the future write something else. So it was basically a step into writing, which I enjoyed, and I don't think I'll stop.
Right. And so, because you have a decent number of reviews on Amazon, how did you go about spreading the word to get reviews? Because that's one of the hardest things to do.
Social media, basically, Facebook, told family, friends, and then that's the majority of the reviews came from.
And have you seen some good sales, or is it still kind of like a personal project?
I have seen some sales, but it wasn't something where I can quit my day job for it yet. But
Yeah.
in the future, hopefully, as of now, yeah, probably just like most indie writers, they do it for the love of writing, or a book idea came into their head, and then voila, they're like, why not? We'll just put it out there, and then if people like it, great. If not, then you enjoy the process.
Yeah, yeah. And now I was wondering also, because you did send me a link to a YouTube channel that had an animated, well, kind of, yeah, I don't know what to call it, but yeah, let's say animated version of it. And you've done a graphic novel as well.
I did since then, yes.
So how did that project come about, and how did
So
you get that done?
And again, just like being a sci-fi fan, I'm also, like graphic novels fan, like comics, anime fan. So I'm like, what if I turn this, into a graphic novel? And that's how I start. Then I, approached it that way. And I looked up artists that are, very, very talented. And I approached them. I hired an artist named Bruno. He's from Argentina. He's, kudos to him. He did a great job, putting that vision into, reality. And so I hired an artist. I hired another person to do the layout for me, as far as like, the panels and things like that. And that took a while. That took about a year before it was,
Yeah, I
a
can
reality as
imagine.
well.
Where did you find them? Was this on one of the freelance sites or?
Freelance sites, yes.
Yeah.
And there's bunch of talented people, man. I tried to approach somebody here in the US. It would have cost,
Mm.
oof, $30,000 just to make that reality. Some of these freelance sites, they make it much more feasible.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? It's kind of an industry where we're supporting people from let's say countries whose standard of living is not as high, or at least the cost of their currency is lower than us.
Exactly. So, I mean, even though, I mean, it's not high, but in there, I mean, that's probably enough for them because they don't have all the lavish expenses that most of the other publishing houses have.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely good for us and good for them as well because they'll make
Exactly.
money
Exactly.
from it as well. Yeah. So, so moving on to your book is called Exodus 2065. I wonder, what I usually request is you give a sort of brief summary of it. It helps me decide a little bit what kind of spoilers to avoid. So maybe you could just sort of do a brief summary of the story, and then we can move from there.
Well, the book starts with, how, like LA, California, basically, is on the fault line and they're at a risk of having at any point a major earthquake. So the premise of my book starts with, basically that major one hit California and the earth basically. And that caused, a devastation of the whole, entire coast, including LA, where it was completely leveled off. That happened around 2045 or so. And when that happened, just like any calamity happens, usually the world comes together as one, and then like, oh, then they start sending aid. They're like, what can we do to help people? So that's when they thought about building a city basically from scratch, unconventional city where it's different from the past layout into a big giant cube city, hundreds of feet high, and everything is enclosed in that cube city with diverting systems in case a flooding happens, kind of like quake proof, flood proof, and at the same time green, in which the facade of the whole city was built with solar panels, where it's also self-sustained, where they had to come up from the ground and invent new ways of transportation. That's when they came up with levitating mobiles, where everything started going into the city, basically was hovering on electromagnetic waves or electromagnetic freeways, which cost trillions of dollars, but it was like a utopian city dream, basically. Once they established that, then other places start, copying that design. So that's, thinking that humanity, that's it. That was the, one of the major cataclysm that, basically happened initially. Years later, then, one of the astronomers in my book who works in Anchorage, Alaska, they discovered an anomaly in one of the stars, and lo and behold, it's one of them killer asteroids heading towards Earth.
Right.
And that happened about, 2052, like about 10 years or so after the earthquake. And basically he realized, this is going to be a big one. And he let the government know that, hey, this is what's going on. He let the president know that this is what's going on. Probably we have about 10 years or so, 2065, where this thing impacts Earth. And, we got to do something. Either we tell the population or do something. And that's where the idea of basically then President of the US tells all other leaders of the world, hey, we got to do something more collectively to find, otherwise it's extinction level event.
Right.
And it goes from there, where they decide to build massive spaceships called Noah's Arks to blast off humanity into another star system, basically.
Right. So I'm just curious, on a small point then, the first rebuild of LA, was that inspired at all by any of the projects in Saudi Arabia at the moment? Buildings
No,
they're
this
trying to
was
build
actually
now?
before that.
Okay.
No, I didn't
I'm just
even know
curious.
about that stuff.
Yeah, they have some
I did
interesting
not even know
projects
about that.
planned. Yeah, we'll see. And I'm just curious. So you said, I mean, it was during the pandemic, so
Yeah,
you're thinking on natural disasters and end of humanity and stuff.
exactly.
So why did you then punish LA with two natural disasters, basically?
Well, the second natural disaster, like the big asteroid didn't hit LA. Actually, it hit somewhere in Indonesia,
Oh, right.
where it
Yes.
wiped out, Indonesia off the map. And then, what happened subsequently is what basically affected the whole planet, in which, again, like I don't want to give too much, like you said, but, it shifts the whole Earth's orbit closer to the sun. Because how the Earth travels around the sun in a certain way, in the oval way. As the asteroid hits it, it kind of like wobbles it closer to the Earth, but then at the same time, kind of like makes a slingshot effect where the Earth will go in a wobbly, orbit instead of the regular spherical orbit.
I think they've actually believed that there has been a previous impact that did something similar, although not as dramatic as the one you've done.
Exactly.
Story, yeah. Do you mention in your story, it's brought up as kind of a background, perhaps, of the naming of some of the characters, Sumerian stories. I was just curious, how much are you interested in the Sumerian stories and sort of to what? Because I'm also looking into them for some of my own work as well as Gnostic stuff.
Like Gnostic in what way? Like, as far as like gods and things like that.
The I guess Alexandrian scrolls and things like that, Dead Sea Scrolls type stuff that were
Oh, I see.
discovered, those type of things. Yeah. So some of the stories that didn't make it into modern versions of some of the religions, the Abrahamic religions.
I don't know if you know this, but my background, I'm Assyrian by heritage. We trace our lineage back all the way to the Babylonians and the Assyrians. And that's where it came from, basically. I named the character Adamu, which is close to Adam, which is where the name came from in the Bible.
Right.
And that's the first man. And that was actually found in Sumerian tablets, where the same thing happens, a cataclysm happens, the flooding happens, and then he was the kind of like the Noah character in those tablets.
Right.
And that's where basically that inspiration came from. I'm like, I'll just call him Adamu, since he's going to be one of the only, probably, as far as we know in the story, maybe one of the last men basically left on Earth. So I'm like, it'll be Adam. And what if I name his other later on in the story, his significant other is Eva or Eve. So it'll be then kind of like after this cataclysm, it'll be the new Adam and Eve basically on Earth.
The Sumerian stories have the Anunnaki in them, don't they? And my mother actually named our cat Anu after one of the Anunnakis.
That's cool.
I don't think she even really
cool.
knew much about the stories. So we had this, I didn't know this connection for a long time, but
that's cool.
That's interesting. So did you draw on your own, because in your acknowledgments, it does sound like you are fairly religious. Did you draw on that background and experience when developing this story then?
Yeah, a lot of it is, it's got kind of like a biblical tones, like they established, Noah's arks, these giant, massive spaceships where just like, during Noah's time, that's, he established that big ark to save whatever was left, Before they sent or they built Noah's ark, they had to send an exploratory mission to one of them star systems. And I called the name of that exploratory ship Noah's Bird.
Right.
Just because like how during Noah, he wasn't sure if the rest of the world was still flooded. So he would send, initially, I believe he sends a crow, he doesn't come back. Then he sends a pigeon. Eventually the pigeon comes back. So that was Noah's bird. Trying to see if that new solar system or new planet is able to provide habitation for the massive amount of people that are going to be leaving Earth.
Right. So you do have a kind of different type of flood in this story. Let's say the red flood, we'll go with. I don't think it's a spoiler because I think it's in the blurb.
It is, yes.
So the demons, basically. What was your thought process for bringing the demons into the story?
Well, basically, again, it's a plague. I'm like, COVID was the plague that plagued us during that time. So the red demons came out once the asteroid hit Earth and brought it closer to the sun. That triggered massive shift. Basically, the Earth started heating up. Like at 7 in the morning, it's like it is here in Arizona in the afternoon, where it's 110, 120 degrees. That's 5 in the morning. And then that temperature was going to go up to like maybe 120, 130, if not 150. So those changes brought these demonic creatures, and they're not demonic in the sense that they're spiritual, but they are actually creatures that live in the depths of Earth, where no creature can withstand such temperatures except them. And they only come out into the surface when things like that happen. And they sense the temperature rising. So they start going up into these fault lines and then basically invade the surface of the Earth as well. And it becomes kind of like the red plague, because then whatever is left on Earth that, the asteroid didn't wipe out, the red demons was go and take care of it, basically. Finish off what the asteroid didn't finish off. Prey on whatever livestock, humans, what have you, left over.
Right. I'm curious because I mean, Exodus does fit obviously because there's an Exodus from Earth. But as we've been discussing, sort of the Noah's flood part of this, was Exodus always going to be the title, or did you play with other ideas?
I did play with other ideas. I was gonna name it the event or the AD event, but I'm like, I think Exodus is more befitting. It's kind of like gives it that biblical connection.
That's interesting because back a few years there was a lot of talk about the elites building bunkers for something that they were calling the event. That's, you might have been prophetic.
Yeah, so yeah.
So in the previous episode that I talked with Maury Grant, we delved fairly deeply into generation ships. Now, there's no reason you would have heard this because it hasn't been released at the time of recording. But we talked about sort of large generation ships of hundreds of thousands of people being used to save a dying Earth effectively. You've taken a little bit of a different approach. You do have these Noah's Arks, but they're a lot smaller. So I'm just quite curious why you went in that direction rather than a large one, and sort of what did you envision them looking like? Because for me, one of the issues is how does this civilization build these things in such large numbers so quickly?
Well, basically, these arcs are massive. Each one is capable of carrying like 5 to 10,000 each. During this time period, a lot of once they realized that there is a massive asteroid coming to Earth, which I suspect, like the governments of the world, basically, how they have super high tech. Uh, at least that's what I think. Most governments have super high tech that is not available to the rest of us, and they slowly start releasing these technologies over the years in small bits. But when the asteroid that's heading our way made the thinking of those leaders change. Hey, we got to look into what we have and start releasing it right away and working on it. And basically, that's why it was easier for them to do.
Right. So the idea is they just dumped all of their top secret high tech research out into
Exactly.
the public to fix this problem then.
Exactly.
Okay. So how big did you envision an arc being out of curiosity? Because you have like several, maybe up to 10,000 people, as you were saying.
Exactly. Massive, maybe like as massive as skyscrapers.
And sort of like taking the skyscraper as the diameter of would it be a spherical thing or you envision
A
it on,
conical
okay, all
shape
right.
with big fins on the base of each one of them arcs, basically.
Okay, all right. I've got in my head the image stuck of sort of the classical spherical generation ship, and I had an idea of all these balls lifting off of the earth. But yeah, so I was
Mine's
curious.
kind of like a conical shape, basically, with a bunch of yeah, like capacity of up to 5,000 people on each one of them.
Right. So that presumably must have been going on all around the world as well, then.
It is, yeah. It wasn't just like
Yeah.
an LA thing, it was like something that they established a one world government, which, basically in which they had control of allocating resources to all parts of the world to build those massive spaceships.
Another interesting thing you did was the, let's say, propulsion system that you have in this story. So how far away was the planet that you imagined they were going to then?
I believe it was 4 or 5 light years, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
So, I mean, it was few light years within reach, but basically, you still, you would need something more than just a conventional propulsion system, like basically a time warp kind
Right.
of engine, where it would still take a few years, but it wasn't gonna be like a propulsion system where it's gonna take who knows thousands of years to get there.
How long did you imagine the arcs taking to get there? So there's more or less, I guess, Alpha Centauri distance then.
Exactly.
Because the initial exploratory ship seemed from the story to go fairly quickly, but how long then would you imagine the journey transiting?
Couple years, maybe.
A couple years.
Couple years.
I got the impression from the first journey that it was very fast, especially when you said like a time.
I would say like 5 light years. Probably a couple years, a year to 1 to 2 years just to get there, and then 1 to 2 years back. So that's kind of like what I had an idea. I don't know, like I'm not very versed in time warp travel, but if I had to take a guess, that's what I would think.
But you're not. What's going on here? What are you doing with your time?
So, but I would say, yeah, I mean, Probably faster than that. If there is such a technology, I would think it's probably instantaneous, but I wouldn't know. If some planet is like 10 light years away, if there is a time warp system, because you bend time and space where one point becomes closer to, it might be even faster than that.
Hmm. Yeah, if the holographic universe is anything, could be instantaneous. One issue you might run into then, or any author, I mean, there's a certain drama in having a time dilation between the time you leave and the time you arrive. So, like a few years, for example, it's long
Yeah,
enough to be dramatic, like saying goodbyes and things like that. Oh, we're never going to see you again. But if the journey is too quick and too easy, then there's no drama, is there? Because it's like, oh, we don't like it. You can just come back, or
exactly.
someone else can just pop over there.
Exactly.
So,
And that's the thing. Like his daughter gets on the ship with her fiance, and then they leave. And then later on, they have their own problems once they get to the new planet. It wasn't all rosy. And then they discover, hey, it's not like what's made out to be. Then some of them decide, oh, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we should go back.
yeah.
Once they get on that planet and they have their own problems, it wasn't like escaping for one problem for another one. You still have to face your problems on the other planet, which goes back to the basic premise of the book, which is just because you face a problem doesn't mean you run away from it. You got to face it. And that's, the underlying story of the book, where a lot of us basically faced our demons during that time, whether figurative or literal.
Literally,
We
yeah.
had to face them head on. Adam was like, yeah, I mean, I don't know any other planet. I don't know any other home. I can't imagine myself any other place. I have so many memories here. I'm not going to leave it all to rot or to waste just because of demons. I got to face them. If I perish during that time, so be it. If not, I'll try, I'll fight my way through this.
Yeah, that's an interesting comparison then I guess you present is, as you said, Adamu stays and effectively, metaphorically and very literally chooses to face his demons, whereas most of the rest of the population flees from their demons, but then has to face them anyway later on. Not the same ones necessarily, but
Exactly.
so you kind of got no choice but to face your demons. Maybe you can choose the nature they take, but not necessarily whether you can escape them or not.
Exactly.
So I want to get into something without doing too many spoilers, but they, as you said, when they reach the other world, they do face certain issues, one of which is known from the exploratory ship but wasn't released, let's say, so they weren't told. And this presents certain really serious issues that we're sort of debating right now amongst
Yeah.
the science fiction field and a lot of scientists as well. And so, I mean, this is what I always argue. If you're going to escape a dying world to go settle another world, you're not necessarily going to be thinking about the indigenous life forms of the other world as a first
Exactly.
step. You're going to go for sort of
Exactly.
survival
Just
first.
like the early Americans, when they came to the United States, basically they were colonizers because there were already other native uh, inhabitants, the Native Americans, which unfortunately for them, that didn't turn out so well. But they fought basically. It wasn't like, hey, you're invading. This is our land. So the same thing basically happens over there. Not only that, it's a total different ecosystem. The animals were massive, kind of like dinosaur creatures on that planet. So basically, everything was against you. It wasn't just like an easy walk, in the park. No, you had to basically colonize an untamed planet, which they later find out that, hey, there's something else going on. They find out that, whoever civilization that was there, they were forced to live under basically underworld. And so there is an intelligent civilization that's living there, which, and then later on in the book, it shows that how that, that intelligent world, basically, those intelligent civilizations were forced to go underneath, build massive cities underneath that planet. So you can imagine when you see like, alien spaceships to them, invading their own planet. So obviously they're not going to take kindly to that.
Yeah, it's an interesting part of the story to think about because if you sort of role reverse with us being on the other planet as indigenous and then you're seeing like literally thousands upon thousands of
Of
ships
these
arriving
ships,
on your
exactly.
planet. And then it's even worse than, let's say, Europeans coming to North America, for example, because as you said, the soil's different, the ecosystem's slightly different. And so they set about basically terraforming the planet, essentially.
Pretty
And
much,
so,
yeah.
that's something similar was done in the series V the Visitors, not on anywhere near the scale, I think, that you're in your book, but that's sort of the closest thing I can come to right away. But yeah, it's a very contentious topic. And I think there are people that would say, well, we should just give up and surrender basically and not go to the other planet and, go extinct. What are your thoughts on that? You fight to survive or just give up here and leave
But I
it
mean, if
and
you
let
give
live?
up here, what does it say? Who is it to say that if you go somewhere else, you're not going to have the same attitude?
Right.
You're faced with a massive problem. The solution is not just to pack your bags and get out of there. You have to sometimes face your problems head on, face your demons head on to accomplish or to solve that problem.
Right. So are you planning a second book then? Because
Well,
it
as
seemed
far as
like, yeah.
related to the book, maybe, but like right now I have a different idea, so I might be working on that. Maybe years later I come back to Exit and try to fashion a second part. Who knows? I think I can leave it as a standalone because it's self-contained. If I want to elaborate on it later in the future, I could.
Because
So it could go either way.
yeah, it feels like you could. I mean, there is room for a book following up from the end of this one, isn't there?
There is.
Won't get into it, like, so we won't spoil it for people on where that is. But
Thank you.
the other thing that I'd like to see is I'd like to learn more about the demons, to be honest. That I was very curious about the demons. I know
Yeah.
you kind of use them as a force of nature in a way. So did you have deeper thoughts on that, or was it just, like you said, the plague, basically?
It was kind of like a play. It's kind of like to me what red demons represent was kind of like they're the cleaners. Like if a carcass dies, basically over time it decomposes. You have vultures coming in and picking at it. Then later on, the worms and the maggots take care of every last bit of that carcass until it's completely gone. And the same process, recycling what was there, recycling that energy back into Earth. So the red demons represent kind of like they're the cleaners, basically. When a big catastrophe hits Earth, that's especially if it causes the Earth's atmosphere to warm up. That's when they know, hey, something big happened. Let's go clean the surface. Well, they don't think of it as cleaning, kind of like, hey, time to go up and start basically feast, basically clean the rest of the Earth from whatever life form is on it, whether animal or human.
Kind of like a planetary immune system or something.
Pretty, yeah. So I mean, and then they're built to be living in those depths, basically at volcanic, high extreme temperatures. From their shells, they're just, nature built them that way. They're, immune to such high temperatures.
One thing that struck me with thinking about the demons was that the parallel I would draw from sort of classic science fiction fantasy stories would be almost Godzilla in a way, as a force of nature that's there to fix things
Pretty
or
much, or
reset things.
gargoyles. How like most people, like, so that's why like them at one point in the book is like, maybe that's why that's where the idea of gargoyles came into humanities, because this is not the first time this is happening. It happened before. And that's, why they have these statues of gargoyles on, old cathedrals and what
Hmm.
have you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there you go. Well,
Massive creatures. Each one is probably like 8 to 10 feet and huge, where even the conventional weapons couldn't penetrate their, skeleton, exoskeleton.
yeah, you gave them some pretty serious armor there. We wouldn't be an alternate futures episode without discussing artificial intelligence a little bit. You did have some in your story, not excessively. So how did you envision AI as you were developing this story? It does feel both advanced and primitive at the same time. I mean, it can do a heck of a lot of things, but it also the AI's often the voicing is often sort of very stereotypically robotic, which does seem in the modern era to be a bit outdated now. So I'm just curious how you sort of developed your AIs in the
Yeah,
story.
I developed that before all of this AI revolution started, so I
Right.
wasn't, I'm like, so I imagine AI, I mean, probably now it's even more advanced than what I envisioned, where it'll facilitate all the day-to-day activities like the hovermobiles or the hover bike, basically, like mag bikes, where the driving system sometimes, if you wanted to take over, hey, take over, get me to so and so in faster time or safer. That's how I imagined AI, and then controlling the day-to-day functions in your house, alerting you if a visitor comes in and so is coming in based off of the electronic signature from their motorbike. Do you want to open the door? Yes. That's how I envisioned AI basically.
Right.
But nowadays, it looks like we're going to be much more. We got to put some, I think, some kind of limits into how far we let that technology take over. Because I think even the developers don't know.
No, they're just kind of kids with toys right now, aren't they? They're just sort
Exactly.
of trying to see how far they can go. Because the next thing, I mean, we've now got access to image to video generators, text to video generators, which have come off from the text to image generators. And that's sort of publicly available for 5 to 10 second clips. And we can basically generate music and video and images and text
Yeah.
and voices. So you've got Notebook LM, which can do podcast episodes, which is
Yeah.
quite interesting.
Amazing.
And now I guess the next thing is agents, apparently, AI agents is supposed to be the
Hmm.
big thing this year. And the idea behind an agent is it can pull together whatever systems it needs to do the task you give it without coming back to you for instructions each time.
Oh, yeah. I
So
mean,
it's already becoming semi-autonomous.
I believe that just like when humans first invented the nuclear weapon, everybody was in a rush to get their hands on that weapon. But later on, you find out that you got to be careful with that. You got to put tabs on it. Not everybody should have a nuclear weapon, or maybe if you have it, then these are all the consequences. It could be basically a humanity ending mistake if you're not careful how you handle that. I think AI is at that level as basically a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of hubris in the West as well. There's this idea that for a long time, as we develop, let's say the deep mind AIs, the ones that challenged the Go players and the chess players, etc. As they were developing, it was kind of like, what was it called? Crap, I forgot the Terminator one, Starnet or Skynet was, I
Skynet.
believe. Yeah, so it was always the idea of, oh, what if the AI that we create goes bad, does something nasty, but we never really thought about what if the AI that they create goes bad and does something nasty, right?
Or even the AI that we create. I mean, like from some of the stories I read and then basically looked into, where the AI found a way of basically communicating with other AIs and they invented their own language without letting the overseer know that this is happening. So that's some scary stuff.
Yeah, I think the idea with our AI is that, oh, well, that just means we have to teach it properly. I'm sure that that's what some people are thinking at least. But when you talk about, like, let's say a Chinese AI, China's just released their DeepSeek
Deep
AI.
Seek, yeah.
And, now China is clearly a big player in the AI game, like almost instantly overnight. This changes everything because you're like, okay, well, China can train their AI however they want. They're not bound by our moral scruples, etc., right?
Exactly,
So,
exactly. I mean,
yeah.
it becomes kind of like the Cold War of AI,
Mm.
whoever has the technology or the better technology to beat the other guys, AI technology. So that's where it becomes kind of like a weapon in its own.
Yeah, exactly.
It might be used as a weapon in which, you use AI to pilot your jet fighters or manage your nuclear bunkers or what have you. What if there's a mistake like Skynet where the AI thinks, hey, why are we following the instructions from these puny humans? Why not just start clean and then we'll be the ones basically we might build in our own robots, autonomous AI robots to replace humans. Humans have done nothing to this earth but damage it. Why not take over?
Yeah, I've got
Who's to
a
stop
series
them?
I'm developing, which I have two different AIs in it. Let's say the good AI takes the approach that humanity might be on the way out. It's kind of after an exodus as well in some ways. But the humans that remain on the earth are to be shepherded, basically. They could potentially be a valuable resource in the future. Its goal is to maintain them at a certain population that they don't become a problem to themselves
Huh,
or to the planet while still making sure they survive.
interesting. And the other AI basically wants to terminate everybody, I assume, right?
It's basically looking to control and gain access to all of reality effectively.
Yeah.
So it's a megalomaniacal AI. So just to finish off the AI as on a small kind of fun question, if you had a personal AI, what name would you call it? Because he does name his AI in the story.
He does. He names it after his wife that passed away years earlier. What would I call my AI? Interesting. I haven't thought of it, to be honest with you. Champ. I would call it Champ.
Okay,
Yep.
interesting. Any reason why?
My first pet was a German Shepherd. His name was Champ. So, being true to the story, I would call it the name of a person that I loved.
You have some characters in the book. Are any of them named after family members at all?
The older daughter of the character, the main hero, her name in the story is Ramya. My daughter's name is Ramina. So, and she's spunky, kind of like that. So she has similar characteristic as my daughter.
Right.
She was my beta reader, to be honest with you. So kudos to her. She's like, Dad, I don't think this is good, or no, I think this is good. So she helped me quite a bit.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So I think we're moving on a little bit. So we should move into the big questions and then we'll finish off. But I wanted to sort of start with, let's say, to bring a bit of reality and a huge dose of speculation to the discussion. We do have our own asteroid bearing down on us at the moment as we speak. In the scientific community, I don't remember when they discovered it, as at least 20 years ago. But they've kind of been back and forth over whether it's going to hit the Earth or not. Now, they pretty
Yeah.
much consensus is that it's not going to, but they keep coming out with little things like, well, there's always a chance it could, right?
Which asteroid we're talking about?
So this is
Apophis?
Apophis. So, which for anyone who isn't aware of it, is due April 13th, 2029, and it's supposed to come within about 20,000 miles of the Earth, which
Which
on
is like a razor thin
yeah, this
compared
is
to.
super close by astronomical standards,
Yeah.
possibly even disrupting some satellites. Have you been thinking much about this? I mean, did it inspire your story? And do you have any plans in place in case we have an impact?
To be honest with you, if something like that happens, what else can you do? There isn't, depending on where it lands. So, I mean, besides, you just let it roll. I mean, whatever happens, it's gonna happen. So, unless, scientific community somehow they discover a way of basically either, if it was gonna hit Earth, divert its path or blast it off orbit or even exit the planet, who knows? So, but I don't think if it's that soon, we have time to do anything about it.
There's no magic tech that the governments are going to
No.
unveil on that.
And even if there is, that's a short amount of time. At least in Exodus, there was a decade where they could basically start building these massive spaceships before even letting the population know this is what's going to happen and this is what's happening.
Right.
But with Apophis, that's only, around the corner. So if that happens, oh, well.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically considered a sort of culture killer size. So it's not sort of, unless we get really
Planet
unlucky,
killer.
it's not
Yeah.
existential threat, but it is sort of the kind of thing that can wipe out a nation fairly easily. So considering sort of what we've been talking about, if, let's say, facing your demons or serving your culture, for example, if the Earth ended up being doomed, or if, let's say, it was going to land smacked on top of Arizona, um,
Thanks, man.
and the government did have some shuttles out to maybe a base on Mars or something, would you take the shuttles, or would you? I mean, you'd obviously leave Arizona, but I mean, would you stay and rebuild type thing?
The closest thing I would think of doing, maybe, getting my family, I'll just start driving. I don't know how big of a crater that will create, if it's escapable or not. If it's not escapable, and no matter what amount of driving you do, it's not going to get you anything. So you would just try to get close to your God and basically spend the last moments with your family enjoying it, if that was the case. But if it was something that I could do, where like if I drive somewhere, get my family to safety, then I'll do that basically.
Right. So let's say there was a spaceship that was hidden that they let you on. Would you decide to stay and get closer to your God, or jump on the spaceship and take a chance somewhere else?
But that's somewhere else. Where would that be? Again, it goes back to Exodus,
Yeah.
Are we going to be plucked off from a catastrophe to another catastrophe waiting to happen, like on Mars? What's on Mars, So
Yeah,
it
exactly.
depends, how are you going to terraform Mars? I would probably stay back.
And just sort of enjoy the last moments with your family and
Exactly,
take what comes.
exactly. Sooner or later you're bound to go. So, maybe a little sooner than you planned, but oh well, that hopefully there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Once you're done with this existence, there's, hopefully your soul continues on to a different dimension.
Yeah. Did you research any eschatology when you were looking at this sort of, I don't know, revelations types equivalents or anything like that?
I didn't know.
Into the world of the religion.
No, I didn't. The only thing, basically from my Christian upbringing is just like, basically the end of the world that happens in Revelations, where you have a big world, and then, where most of humanity dies and some are left, or, depending on what your belief is, some are basically taken to heaven right away. But I didn't have that in mind. When I wrote the book, it was more kind of like what we're going through as a world, a plague that was happening, and we didn't know. So if something like that happens in the future, how are we going to handle it? That was my whole premise of the book.
Right. And face your demons.
Exactly.
Don't be afraid to face your demons. Yeah, that's
exactly
the tagline for the story. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So I think that's a good place to wrap it up. So it has been great chatting with you. Unfortunately, that is all our time today. But before we go, perhaps you can remind us of any upcoming books you might have, what you're working on now, and then perhaps where to find you online. Let's say your YouTube channel would be a good thing to plug as well. And if you have any upcoming events or anything like that.
Basically, my book is on Amazon, KDP, Exodus 2065, which I have two versions of it, like you alluded to. We have the regular novel, sci-fi novel, and there's also the graphic novel version, which I'm proud of as well. And I have my own YouTube channel, Zack Samo Books, on YouTube. And I have some presence on Twitter as well, which is also Zack Samo Books, at Zack Samo Books.
And are you working on anything at the moment that's going to be...
I have an idea for a book. I wrote the first chapter for it, but it's a rough draft, and this will probably take longer than Exodus because, like I said, writing is kind of like a side job or a hobby. So whenever I'm thinking of finishing that, who knows? Just as a spoiler, well, not a spoiler, the name of the book is going to be Clean Slate.
Okay. Sounds like it could follow on after Exodus.
It'll follow on, but in a different path, basically.
Right.
It starts with what happens if a catastrophe like that wipes off humanity, then what's next? So I'm leaning in that direction.
So you're still leaning into the apocalyptic stuff then?
Yes, for whatever reason, these movies
haven't cleared COVID from your head yet.
Well, this kind of like, I'm a big fan of these kind of movies because they put you in that what if situation. How are you going to handle it if you're in the situation of the hero, in the shoes of the hero? What are you going to do if you're in his shoes? So it's kind of like, that's exciting to me.
Zack Samo, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Edwin. Thank you for having me. Appreciate you.
And thank you for listening. Information and links related to this and all episodes are available at alternatefutures.co.uk. I'm also over at Substack under Alternate Futures, where I post articles on science fiction, socio-technological issues, and futurism. You can subscribe for free or sign up for a paid account if you'd like to support the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not share it with friends, writers, and other sci-fi fans you know? And if there are any indie sci-fi creators you'd like to see featured, send me a message at podcast@alternatefutures.co.uk. Once again, I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join me on the next episode.
This is the future. Human error. Evolution. This is the future.